Howdy, and welcome to the first video for week 3. This is when we start getting into the details of our enterprise risk and how risk can be calculated. I have posted for you a Harvard Business Review article about data science, and it's a good article. Just found it last night, even though it was published in February. I guess I need to keep up with my reading a little better. But talks about the ability to communicate risk. So that's something that we're going to be looking at in these next couple lectures. How we build diagrams, how we hide the complexity of the math. So stay with me. And this is an influence diagram. And by the way, this is chance should be more oval. But basically, it's 3 different ways to look at something. If it's oval or represented here as circles, it's uncertainty. So we often say that something is a chance or a probability. We put our rectangles as our decisions or our objectives, where we're going to get to. And then we also see in our subsequent that we have diamonds. Let's look at these for the actual decision. Right? So decisions, uncertainties, and objective. And then what the purpose of this diagram is to look at the influences among the nodes. Now I'm going to let you in on a little secret as someone who is a mathematician, although I'm not really practicing as a mathematician. Anytime you have a problem of any complexity and you can represent it as a graph, you have gotten halfway to being able to solve that, because we have very strong graph processing algorithms. Graphs are two components. They're either an arc, a pathway between a node and another node, or they're nodes. Now the nodes may be ovals, diamonds, rectangles, double circles, whatever. Doesn't matter, but basically all mathematical graphs fall down to, are they nodes or are they arcs or pathways between the nodes? So these that you're talking about here, decisions, uncertainties, and objectives, are types of nodes. And what you'll see is what the arcs represent, the pathways between these different nodes, is the influence that they have. So we picked a simple example. What are you going to do this weekend with your family? And let's see, what's going to go into that? There's going to be uncertainty. What's the weather being forecasted? What's the weather actually like? You notice here we're calling them nodes. Those 2 nodes represents that the weather is known and the forecast is uncertain, right? That's always probabilistic. Then we have the objective, and what we have as an objective here is we want our family to be satisfied. We want our family to have a good weekend. You know, this satisfactions are labeled within this node. We want to have a good time, be happy, come back, rest, and relax. So that's what the objective is. We want to represent the satisfaction gained by the family objective. So, or excuse me, by the family activity. So what can an objective look like? It can look like, what do we want for a profit? What do we want as a product price? What do we want as a market share? What do we want in cybersecurity to minimize the number of data breaches or the data attacks or the consequences of that? Basically, that objective function can be anything. That's where your business functions come from. So you can see that very simply, the forecast is going to, the weather is going to determine the forecast, which is going to, excuse me, let me say this better. The weather is going to influence the forecast, which is going to influence the family activity, which is going to influence the satisfaction. So you plan a great weekend, you're going to be outside, you're going to be hiking, you're going to be playing with your kids, you're going to be having a picnic, and a storm moves in. And that weather just never quite works out the way we want. And the forecast says, oh, it's going to go by. Don't worry about it. 2 hours from now. But it doesn't. It lingers. So this is what's a probabilistic, and it affects that. And remember, your satisfaction is your objective. This is what we want to get to. Now, deterministic nodes, and this is going to be a little confusing, so just stick with me here. Deterministic nodes are a variant of the uncertainty node. And what we mean is everything we want to think about as probabilities. Probabilities can be anywhere from 0 to 1, all right? 75%, which is 0.75, is between 0 and 1, chance I'm going to be on time tomorrow if there's no accidents when I drive up to College Station. Okay, 25% chance there's going to be an accident or something, there's going to be construction or something's going to happen. Well, these are a variant of the uncertainty nodes, or when we have a probability, a given probability. We don't have a, or we have a, think of them as a probability of 1. It's going to happen. All right. So basically, nodes are always, and when we talk about uncertainty, we're talking about probabilities, but sometimes our probability is 1. What's the chance that tonight, or what's the chance that in the next minute I'm going to be recording this video? It's pretty much 1, okay? So occasionally we give uncertainties a given value, usually 1, to say this is going to happen. It doesn't always have to be 1, maybe it's 0.5, but we give them a fixed value and not a probability. So a probability always has some uncertainty. Remember, if you look at a graph of a probability, you always have that, like the weatherman says, between 1 and 3 inches of rain, all right? You have some kind of distribution around that probability. But what we're doing in deterministic is we're saying, no, no distribution, this is going to happen. Half the time, the coin flip's going to be heads. Half the time, the coin flip's going to be tails. Well, in probability, you do 1,000, your first 20 may all be heads. But over the 1,000, it pretty much sets to 50-50 if the coin is, in fact, not compromised and fairly balanced. So sometimes just for simplicity or the fact that we have a lot of data, we determine a value. And I might have misled you in the beginning saying a probability of 1. It's not necessarily a probability of 1, but it's a fixed value. Now, we're not teaching you mathematics, because if we were, this is what we'd be looking at. And they're mathematical representations of a decision situation. Remember what I told you. If I can put it in a graph, I've got tons of graph algorithms to process that. Even if you can have 100,000 nodes in a complicated graph, it's amazing the computational values that can be in just, most a couple of seconds, right? Probably less than a second. So this is what it looks like to the mathematician. Oh, goody, we don't have any real worlds there. We have a chance, we have probabilities, we have decisions, and the like. Well, what does it look like to you? What it looks like to you is this. So the math, my point is, I'm not here to teach you math. I'm not the person to teach you math. I've gotten a little rusty. But the math behind this is very complex, but the assumptions are presented in a simple way. We can all understand an objective function. We can all understand uncertainties, and we can all understand its decision or objectives along the way. So here's the deal. All of these technologies have strengths and weaknesses. And anything that I can show you in a picture like this and say this relates to this, and I can go back and give you definitions, it's easy to understand. It becomes very intuitive. Oh, I can do that. You don't need a great level of sophistication. About 20 years ago or so, I was doing what was called at that time business process reengineering at Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City, and we would have people that were domain experts that knew the processes for maintenance of this sophisticated aircraft, but they lacked a certain engineering background. It didn't matter. We could get them to capture their processes. One person brought in just butcher block paper and began to draw these drawings, right? Because there's something about a drawing that's essentially so simple to communicate. So they're easy to understand, they're intuitive, they help communication. You'd rather look at diagrams like this, even if they're very long, even if it's on butcher block paper and takes the size of a normal table, than to try to read all of that in text. And it grows linearly with the variables. So as we add complexity to it, we're okay with it. Now, the weaknesses they can be visually complex. I have been in situations in my long career where we literally took a wall to put up diagrams because we couldn't figure out a way to make them hierarchical where we could decompose them. And the other weakness is you must have uncertainty in there. You can't just take some guess. And that comes from your data analytics where you're going back through historical data. The issue with the historical data is what I always refer to is why do we have a small side view mirror and a large windshield, right? The side view mirror looks in the past. The windshield looks ahead. So often we are modeling uncertainty based on historical data. That's true throughout all these technologies. All these technologies is how do we determine the parameters, including uncertainty, to be modeled. Here's the sources for that. Thank you for staying with me. Stay tuned for video 2 and video 3. And even though it is about 17 pages long, I urge you to read through the HBR article. I think you'll find it very illuminating. Thank you.